Hi, I'm Maris. Last Christmas, my father raised his glass, smiled like a magician, and said, "Surprise, sweetheart. We sold everything. Tomorrow, we're moving in with you." And just like that, they all acted like my life was theirs to claim. What they didn't expect was what I said next. Because when someone steals your home, your name, your trust, you don't set another place at the table. You set a line they'll never cross again. Before we dive in, tell us, what time are you listening and where from? Drop it in the comments. This is the story of the porch, the lie, and the family I had to burn to the ground to finally breathe. Christmas Eve in Texas isn't the postcard version most people imagine. No snow, no sleigh bells. Just the soft hum of central heat and the smell of baked ham clinging to the air. I'd spent the afternoon setting the table just so, silverware lined up like soldiers, cloth napkins folded sharp and neat, candlelight flickering off the wine glasses. Everything had its place. Perfection has always been my defense. By 6:45, I had poured myself a small glass of Cabernet and stood by the window, watching the headlights snake up the driveway. Right on time. Early, even. Just like always. Control disguised as punctuality. I opened the door before they had a chance to knock. "Sweetheart," my mother trilled, the words soaked in saccharine. Her arms opened wide, full of too much perfume and too little sincerity. "Mom," I gave her a quick hug. She smelled like cinnamon and something sour underneath. My father stepped in behind her, booming with holiday cheer that felt rehearsed. "Maris," he said, clapping me on the shoulder like I was one of his old bank associates. "The house looks great. You always had a knack for making things work." "Thanks," I said, stepping aside. "Dinner's ready." Venora arrived a few minutes later in a red dress that hugged her too tightly for a family dinner, her husband nowhere in sight, as usual. She kissed the air beside my cheek. "Still living like a minimalist, I see?" I smiled tightly. "Still freeloading with style, I see?" She laughed like it was a joke, like it was always a joke with me. My tone had been pleasant, but I knew she felt the jab. That was the game we played. Polite cruelty. The table looked beautiful. The food smelled divine. The conversation, however, reeked. Dad stood up halfway through the first course, glass in hand. "I just want to say," he began, looking around the table with that banker's grin, "how grateful we are to have a daughter like you, Maris. Your success, your home, your stability, well, it's something your mother and I admire deeply. Here it comes. And that's why," he continued, placing a firm hand on Mom's shoulder, "we've decided to sell the old house. And the car. We're moving in with you, sweetheart. Tomorrow." He said it like he was offering me a puppy. Mom beamed. "You have so much space, honey. It'll be lovely. Family under one roof again." I blinked. My fork hovered midair. I hadn't heard wrong. They weren't asking. They were informing. "They didn't ask. They never ask," my mind whispered. Venora tilted her wineglass and gave a smug little shrug. "Finally, we'll all be together again, just like old times. Except the last time we were together, I was the one paying her rent behind the scenes and pretending not to notice the mystery charges on Dad's credit card." I swallowed hard. The room felt colder, like someone had opened a window. Only nothing had moved, just the heat draining from my chest. Silence ballooned, filled only by the soft jazz still playing in the background. I placed my knife and fork down carefully. The sound of metal on ceramic cracked through the room louder than it should have. All eyes turned to me. I looked at each of them, Dad with his prideful grin, Mom clutching her pearls like a lifeline, Venora swirling her wine like she owned the place. "Perfect," I said. My voice was even, pleasant. "But you, Mom, and Sis will have to sleep out on the porch, because..." I didn't finish right away. I let the pause hang like an ornament too heavy for the tree. Dad froze, mid-sip, mid-smile. Mom's face stiffened. Venora scoffed. "You're joking, right?" I turned my eyes to her and tilted my head, slowly. "Do I look like I'm joking?" She stared at me, confused. She tried to read my face, but I'd spent years learning how not to show my cards. Inside, I could feel it, something uncoiling in me. A tension I'd carried since I was a teenager, cleaning up their messes, putting out fires while they threw matches behind them. I had paid their debts, made excuses at hospitals and banks, and kept my mouth shut at every family function. The thankless daughter, the dependable one, the quiet one. Tonight, I finally ran out of silence. I let the moment sit. Let them wonder. Let the porch comment burn a hole in their expectations. They didn't know what to say. For once, none of them had a script. And as they stared at me, confused and frozen, I realized something else. The moving truck outside wasn't a coincidence. As their faces lingered in confusion, something outside caught my attention. A sudden screech of brakes, sharp against the quiet. I glanced toward the window. The porch light flickered once, then steadied. The noise hadn't come from nowhere. "Ah," Dad chuckled, too fast. "They must have come early. Movers, always on their own schedule." Movers? Without saying a word, I rose from the table. The room didn't move. The air held its breath. I walked to the front window and drew back the curtain just enough to see. There it was, a full-sized moving truck. No logos, just a plain white body, and a cab that hummed low as it idled. Two men in navy hoodies were unloading boxes and stacking them on the sidewalk. One of the boxes was marked clearly in black marker, L. Dane, Master Closet. I didn't blink. My thoughts didn't scatter. They sharpened. They didn't plan to ask. They planned to announce. And this was never about needing help or being close to family. This was about control. They weren't moving in. They were taking over. Behind me, I heard my father's chair creak. Venora let out a little sigh, like she was settling into a movie she'd already seen. Another box came into view, this one labeled Venora Linens. A third, Mom's Kitchen Essentials. My jaw clenched. I turned just enough to see the others. Venora had casually drifted to the entryway, arms crossed, one finger tapping her elbow. She leaned slightly to peek at the movers, then gave a subtle nod. The taller of the two men shifted directions without hesitation. They were following her cues. She wasn't just watching, she was orchestrating. Through the curtain, I caught sight of another man holding a framed photo. It was one I remembered. Thanksgiving, 5 years ago. We were all sitting around the backyard table. In the frame, my face had been cropped out. Only half of it remained. Neatly done. Almost intentional. Mom came up behind me like a ghost, her voice soft and wrapped in fake concern. "We thought we'd surprise you, sweetheart. You're always so alone in this big house. We can help." I didn't look at her. "You brought your own help." The sentence fell into the room like a rock through glass. No one moved. No one laughed. Even Dad didn't try to soften it. I walked slowly toward the front hallway. The overhead light buzzed faintly, like it, too, was trying to say something. Near the coat closet, just inside the front door, boxes were already stacked neatly, not dumped, not randomly tossed, organized. I bent down to read one. Guest room, Mom's things. Not maybe, not emergency bags. No, this was settled, decided, unloaded. Another box beside it was labeled Venora, closet right wall. A sticky note was slapped on top, unpack first. They had already decided which part of my life I would lose. Then I saw it. A small envelope, unsealed, sitting atop a stack labeled Holiday. Decor. My name was written in my father's script, still bold, still slanted. I opened it. Inside, folded neatly, was a copy of the deed to my home, and on the bottom, a signature, mine, from 5 years ago. But beside it, written recently in fresh blue ink, was his name, Richard E. Dane. My throat tightened. The signature line had been tampered with. I wasn't a lawyer, but I'd seen enough documents to know this wasn't right. Mom's voice floated in from behind me, coated in syrup. "We only thought it'd make things easier, honey. No paperwork mess if anything ever happened. You'll always have us." I turned. I held the paper like it weighed 100 pounds. "Easier for who?" Dad stepped forward, hands half raised like he was explaining a misunderstanding. "It's a joint title, Maris. You wouldn't have to worry about taxes or—" "The ink's still wet, Dad." I didn't yell. I didn't have to. He stopped, like someone had hit mute. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was calculated. Everyone in that room realized what just happened, even if none of them wanted to admit it. I folded the deed carefully and slid it back into the envelope. My fingers didn't shake. I didn't let them. The front door was still slightly ajar. Outside, the truck's back door slammed shut. Another box was being carried inside. I knew now, every so-called favor, every false compliment, every staged phone call, and just checking in had been preparation. They weren't coming to live with me. They were coming to make me disappear in my own home. I breathed in deeply. No more guessing. No more benefit of the doubt. Love shouldn't come with paperwork. I walked back to the dining room, placed the envelope on the table beside my wine glass, and picked up the glass with my left hand. "I hope you all enjoy the meal," I said, calm and measured. "I have a few calls to make." Dad looked at Mom. Mom looked at Venora. Venora scoffed, leaned back in her chair like she was already bored. "You're not serious, Maris." I sipped the wine and smiled. Not a sweet smile, not bitter either. Just final. "You'll find out soon enough." As I stepped outside, the chill wrapped around me like an old, familiar warning. The sky had deepened into a heavy navy, the kind that made everything feel slower, heavier. Wind chimes above the porch sang their sad little song, barely moving. I shut the door behind me, leaving the silence of the house behind, though I knew it would try to follow. My fingers were stiff as I scrolled through my phone, finding the number printed in bold at the bottom of the document. Reed and Associates. I didn't hesitate. I tapped the call button. It rang twice. "Reed and Associates, this is Daniel." A calm male voice answered, smooth, professional. Too smooth. I cleared my throat. "Hi, Daniel. My name is Maris Dane. I believe your office prepared a deed for a property transfer involving my home." There was a pause, 3 seconds too long. I heard the faint shuffle of papers, or maybe a hand covering the phone. "Yes," he said finally, slowly. "I was told you'd already approved the transfer." The words didn't hit me like a punch. They slid in sideways, wrong and casual, like someone brushing your hair the wrong way. Subtle, but unmistakably off. "Approved," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "With what signature?" Another pause. This one even longer. "I think," Daniel said quietly, "you should talk to your father." There it was. Not even a full sentence. Just a gentle handoff of responsibility, like a hot potato passed under the table. My stomach turned. They'd planned this. They thought I'd smile, nod, maybe cry a little, and then accept it. They counted on my silence. I didn't hang up. I walked back inside. The dining room looked untouched. Except now Mom was fussing with the plates, stacking them into neat little piles like she was trying to clean up the mess with ceramic and silverware. Venora stood at the kitchen island, humming to herself, pretending not to listen. Dad was sipping his wine, one leg crossed casually over the other, like a man who hadn't just tried to slide a knife between his daughter's ribs and call it love. I didn't say anything. I just walked over and placed my phone on the table. "Speaker's on," I said. "Mr. Reed, would you repeat what you told me?" Dad's eyes narrowed just slightly, then flicked to Mom. Her hands froze mid-stack. On the other end of the line, Daniel cleared his throat. It's all been filed. The county has the documents. You gave verbal consent over the phone." I didn't even blink. Verbal consent from a woman who didn't know she was in the room? Venora stopped humming. The silence in that moment was like stepping into a room with no windows. Airless, close. Dad set his glass down. The clink was too loud. I reached for the folder I'd pulled earlier from the drawer near the kitchen. My original closing paperwork, still pristine, in a blue accordion file I hadn't opened in years. I slid out the first page, held it up. "This," I said, "is my real signature. Bold, clean, precise." Then I held up the new deed. "This?" I let my hand hover. "This one leans to the right. Slight slope, a tail on the S that's never been mine." I turned to face my father. "You didn't even get the slant right." His mouth opened, but no words came. Then finally, weak, defensive, crumbling. "You're overreacting." Venora jumped in, of course. "Dad was just trying to protect you. You've always been a little paranoid about being taken advantage of." I looked straight at her. No smile, no softness. "No, Venora. He wasn't protecting me. He was trying to own me." Mom made a small whimpering noise behind me, like she was just now understanding what all this meant. But I knew better. She always played soft after the storm started, never before. I turned back to Dad. "You tried to forge me out of my own life." He shook his head once. "I raised you. Everything you have." I cut him off. "I earned. I covered your debts when Venora's third business failed. I paid Mom's hospital bills out of pocket because you lost your insurance. I've paid for this house twice already. Once to the bank, once to all of you." No one moved. No one denied it. I looked at him and saw not the man who taught me to ride a bike or helped me build a science project in 6th grade. I saw someone who had long since decided that love meant ownership and obedience meant gratitude. "The man who taught me to tell the truth," I said quietly, "just forged my name to a lie." Mom stepped forward then, hands out like a referee at a Little League game. "We just thought, after all these years, you'd want us close." "You thought wrong," I said. I turned, walked to the coat rack, and pulled on my jacket. The cold had crept into my bones, and not just from the air outside. At the door, I paused. They still didn't get it. I could see it in their faces, the confusion, the disbelief that I wasn't going to let them win this round like every other. I looked back. "You move one more box into this house without my consent," I said, voice low and razor sharp. "And I'll make sure every neighbor on this block knows exactly what you tried to do." I didn't slam the door. I didn't need to. Behind me, I heard Venora hiss something sharp. "You've lost her, Dad." I stepped onto the porch. The night had deepened. The wind was stronger now, tugging at the edges of my coat. My breath rose in a steady fog. I felt like a tree that had just cracked but not fallen. Splintered, maybe, but still standing. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I figured it was Daniel calling back to apologize, maybe try to cover his tracks. But the name on the screen wasn't his, and the moment I saw it, my stomach dropped. I sat in my parked car at the edge of the driveway, engine off, the dashboard casting a soft amber glow across my face. Inside the house behind me, I could still hear them. Muffled voices, sharp edges of words ricocheting off the walls. My wine glass from earlier still sat on the console, untouched since I poured it. The sky had begun to release a light snow, flurries drifting across the windshield like a slow-moving curtain. Then my phone buzzed again. I didn't look right away. A part of me already knew who it was. When I finally turned it over, the screen confirmed it. Daniel Reed. My finger hovered for a beat before I answered. Ms. Dane, he said quickly, breath fogging into the mic like he'd stepped outside. I shouldn't be calling, but I thought you deserved to know. Your father came to my office last week. He asked me to notarize something else. My heart didn't race. It didn't even flinch. It just paused. What was it? I asked calmly. A clause? He said after a moment. It grants them the right to occupy your property indefinitely. Under a family protection clause. It's buried deep, legally sound, technically, but deeply unethical if you never consented. My grip tightened on the steering wheel, even though I wasn't going anywhere. So, I said slowly, they didn't just try to move in, they tried to make it permanent. He sighed heavily. I don't feel good about this, Ms. Dane. Not anymore. I think you already know the rest. The call ended, but the cold lingered. I leaned my head back against the seat and stared through the frost-laced glass at my own reflection, pale, tired, but sharper than I'd looked in years. Somewhere behind me, Richard Dane had probably just refilled his wine, pretending nothing was unraveling. I remembered being 11, seated at our old dining room table, my father teaching me how to sign my name for the first time. Your signature is your promise, he'd said. I learned the lesson. He forgot the meaning. I turned the key and backed slowly out, driving just far enough around the cul-de-sac to reset myself. My hands were steady. My thoughts weren't racing. They were forming a pattern, clear as ice. There's a point where silence stops being peace. That point was about a half hour ago. I pulled back into the driveway. The snow was thicker now. As I stepped out, the night wrapped around me in silence, broken only by the dull hum of the house. Inside, the chaos had grown louder. Venora's voice carried over the others, sharp, blaming. Lorraine's was thick with tears. My father's deeper tone barked something unintelligible before being cut off. I didn't hesitate. I walked in, the door clicking shut behind me like a gavel. They didn't see me at first. I crossed the room, calm, and set my phone on the kitchen island. The screen was still lit, still recording. Dad, I said clearly, you forged my signature. Twice. The room stopped. He turned to me, smile flickering like the lights overhead. You don't understand how these things work, Maris. I understand perfectly, I said, not moving. That's why I recorded the call. Lorraine's gasp was audible. Venora, half drunk and stunned, mouthed something but said nothing. Richard's tone turned to ice. You wouldn't dare. I met his gaze with a calm that felt earned. You really don't know me at all. I reached into the drawer, pulled out the file of my original closing documents, and laid them next to the forged version. Even to the untrained eye, the difference in signature was clear. One firm, one clumsy. You didn't even get the slant right, I murmured. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Venora stepped forward, voice rising. This is ridiculous. He was just trying to own me, I said, cutting her off, because that's what this was. Not help, not love, control. No one argued. I picked up my wine glass, sipped once, and let the silence grow roots in the room. Merry Christmas, I said quietly, turning to leave. Behind me, I heard Lorraine break into a sob. Richard muttered something unintelligible under his breath. Venora slammed a glass down. I didn't look back. Upstairs, the air felt lighter. I sat on the edge of my bed, finally allowing myself to breathe all the way in. They wanted a roof. I gave them a mirror. The house held its breath with me. Downstairs, the sounds began again. Pacing, a door opening, another shutting too hard. I didn't care. It was Christmas Eve. Snow was falling. And I had finally come home. The snow outside had thickened. casting a faint glow through the blinds as moonlight bounced off the white. I'd fallen asleep fully clothed, curled sideways on top of the covers. My phone was face down on the nightstand, my hand still near it. Somewhere in the house, the walls had stopped vibrating with voices. Quiet had settled, but it wasn't peace. It was a pause. And I knew better than to trust pauses. That's probably why I heard it. Footsteps, barely audible, slow, deliberate. I didn't move at first, just listened. Hardwood, weight on heel, then toe. They paused right outside my door. The air inside my lungs stilled. The handle turned slightly, then stopped. No knock, no voice, just stillness. And then, retreating. I waited a full minute before I moved, quiet as I could, sliding off the bed. I didn't bother turning on a light. The hallway ahead was dim, bathed in faint blue from the streetlight outside. I crept toward the source, the boards under the rug creaking faintly beneath me. I could hear something, a whisper, then the gentle tug of a drawer. The study. The door was cracked open. I saw a figure, back turned, crouched in front of my filing cabinet. My father. I stayed in the shadow, watching. He was murmuring under his breath, hands rummaging through folders like a thief who didn't believe he was stealing. "Where is it?" he said low. I stepped forward, my phone already in hand, recording. "Looking for this?" I asked softly. He jerked, stood too quickly. A flash of something crossed his face. Not guilt, not fear, offense. "Jesus, Maris, you scared me." I didn't blink. "You scared me first." He straightened, defensive. "I was just checking something. For you." "I told you not to cross me," I said. "You're in my private files at 3 a.m. What do you call that?" He scoffed. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said flatly. "You're being criminal." He turned away, muttering under his breath, brushing past a pile of folders, one of which was half slid from the drawer. A label caught my eye. Trust Revision. Maris, I picked it up, opened it. Inside were legal drafts, pages dated weeks ago, transfers, power of attorney, business oversight clauses, all drawn up to reassign authority over my assets to a family executive structure. I turned the last page, my name, my signature, tilted slightly left, precise, too perfect. But I didn't sign it. I turned back to him. "They weren't moving in," I said. "They were taking over." He didn't answer. His mouth opened, then closed. I closed the folder slowly, deliberately. "Dad," I said, calm and clear, "I'm going to ask once. Leave my house by morning." His jaw tensed. He stepped toward me. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I replied, "but I'll regret nothing more than letting you stay." I walked past him, folder still in hand. His breath hitched as if he wanted to stop me, but didn't. As I reached the hallway, I heard him murmur behind me, low and almost venomous. I didn't catch the words. I didn't need to. Back in my room, I crouched beside the far wall, pulled back the small woven rug, and lifted the corner of a loose floorboard I hadn't touched in years. It used to hold birthday cards and notes from a boyfriend I thought would last. Tonight, it held betrayal. I slid the folder in, pressed the board down, and sat back. My phone buzzed. Mr. Reed, one new message. "Be careful," they called me again. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then powered it down, let them come. I pulled the blanket over my shoulders, the moonlight sliding in through the blinds in thin silver stripes. One stripe cut across my face, the rest fell behind, half in shadow, half in clarity. That's how morning felt. The gray light came through the curtains like an apology, soft, uncertain, not sure if it should be there. The air was heavy with the kind of quiet that follows a night of truth. Even the house seemed to hesitate, like it didn't want to wake up either. The smell of coffee reached me first, familiar, grounding. I got up slowly, every step reminding me I hadn't slept much. My reflection in the hallway mirror was almost unrecognizable. Calm on the outside, but my eyes told the story. Alert, calculating, waiting. I was halfway down the stairs when I heard a soft knock. Not on the door, my door. When I turned, Venora stood there, pale, her hair messy, her robe tied too tight like she was holding herself together. She was clutching something, a torn envelope. "I found this," she whispered, "under Mom's jewelry box." I took it without a word. The paper was thin, creased, the kind that had been folded and hidden more than once. Inside was a notarized letter, official, stamped, dated. The handwriting was my father's. The words blurred for a moment as my eyes moved down the page. "This document affirms that Maris Dane willingly transferred guardianship of her estate to her father, Richard Dane, effective immediately. Witnessed and notarized on December 18th, 2 years prior." 2 years ago. My pulse kicked. "I was out of the country that week," I said quietly. Venora's lips parted, but no words came out. The kitchen clock ticked behind us, steady, indifferent. I folded the paper once, twice, and turned toward the living room. Richard Dane sat by the fireplace, dressed, composed, reading the morning paper like nothing in the world had shifted overnight. Lorraine sat nearby, clutching a mug, her eyes distant. I didn't stop walking until I was standing right in front of him. 2 years ago," I said, my voice low, calm. "You were forging my name before I even owned this house." He looked up slowly, folding his paper with surgical precision. "It's family, Maris. Everything we have belongs to all of us." I laughed, quiet, humorless. "No, Dad, everything you lost belongs to me, and you can't stand it." Lorraine's hand trembled around her mug. She whispered, "Please, let's not do this on Christmas morning." I ignored her. I turned to Venora. "You knew, didn't you?" Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I held up the letter. "You both signed this lie." Her eyes filled. She sank into a chair, hands over her face. "He said it was temporary," she said, voice cracking. "He said you'd never find out. I didn't think—" "You didn't think," I said flatly. Tears slipped between her fingers. "You were always so strong, Maris. You never needed anyone. I thought—" I cut her off quietly. "I needed honesty, not pity." The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. Lorraine couldn't meet my eyes. My father's jaw clenched. The clock ticked again. I unfolded the letter, smoothing it across the coffee table. "You forged my name. You fabricated witnesses. And you called that love." His voice rose, sharp. "You ungrateful girl. Everything I've done—" "I learned from the best," I said calmly. His face went red. "You think you can talk to me like—" I lifted my phone. The red light blinked in the corner of the screen. "I've been recording since dawn," I said. The words landed like a slap. Lorraine's hand flew to her mouth. Venora froze. Richard's voice dropped to a growl. "You wouldn't dare." "I already did," I replied. For a long time, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint pop of the fire. Venora stood, wiping her face. "I can't do this," she whispered, heading toward the stairs. Lorraine followed her, half in tears. That left just him and me. I looked at my father, really looked. The man who raised me, taught me to work hard, told me my name meant something. Now he sat there like a stranger, surrounded by the ashes of his own pride. "If you can forge my name," I said quietly, "I can erase yours, from my will, from my life." He didn't move, didn't speak, just stared into the fire like it owed him an answer. I turned and walked away. My heart didn't race, my hands didn't shake. He taught me control. He never expected I'd use it against him. Behind me, the letter slipped from my fingers into the flames. The paper curled, darkened, and vanished into ash, the last false promise burning itself clean. The house felt lighter, or maybe I finally did. He wanted control. I wanted peace. Only one of us understood what that cost. By midday, the sun had melted most of the frost clinging to the windows, but nothing could thaw the silence inside that house. The garland on the mantel hung limp, a strand of lights blinking aimlessly. The tree stood untouched. No gifts, no laughter, no holiday warmth, just the cold, sterile tension of something unresolved hanging in the air. I was in the kitchen, refilling my coffee, when the doorbell rang, sharp, purposeful. I glanced at the time, 12:03 p.m. Setting the mug down, I walked to the door, half expecting another delivery or a neighbor with leftovers. But the man waiting outside wasn't bringing food. "Ms. Maris Dane?" the man asked, uniformed, badge clipped to his belt. "Yes?" "I have legal documents for you. I need your signature to confirm receipt." My hand didn't shake until the pen touched paper. I nodded, took the envelope, and thanked him. He nodded back and left without another word. The second I closed the door, I already knew. The return address on the envelope confirmed it. County Superior Court. I opened it slowly, pulling out the stapled papers. At first, the legal jargon blurred. Then the header hit me like ice water. Temporary restraining order filed by Richard Dane, citing emotional harassment and coercion. My heart thudded once, hard, then settled into a slow burn. He struck first, again. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I didn't even move for several minutes, just stood there in the hallway, the document hanging from my fingertips, the words searing themselves into my bones. Then I turned, and I walked. Into the living room, into the war zone. Richard was seated, same spot as always, one leg crossed over the other like nothing had happened. Lorraine sat beside him, wilted, not even pretending anymore. Venora lingered near the archway, like she wanted to disappear into the drywall. I raised the document. "You filed a restraining order against me?" I asked, calm on the outside, the fury threaded so tightly it almost sang. Richard didn't even blink. "Just protecting myself from your temper." I nearly laughed. "My temper?" I stepped forward. "You forged my signature, attempted to seize control of my property and business, and now you're the victim?" Venora took a step forward. "Maris, please." "Quiet," he barked, not even looking at her. "She's always been ungrateful, always thought she was better than us." Lorraine flinched at his tone but didn't speak. The room was so still, I could hear the faint buzz of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Then I inhaled slowly, turned, and walked to the glass cabinet. From the bottom drawer, I pulled out a navy folder, slim, sealed, waiting. I laid it on the table. "This," I said, flipping it open, "is a hard copy of the recording of you admitting to forgery. You remember the one, Dad, from 2 nights ago? You said I gave verbal consent. You said I should talk to my father. I did." I pulled out my phone, tapping the screen. "And this? This is the digital version, already sent to the county clerk's office, filed under fraud, forgery, and abuse of fiduciary duty." Richard's smirk faltered. He looked at me, truly looked at me, for the first time in years. And he knew. "You think this paper chase scares me?" he muttered. "You're bluffing." "I learned how to bluff from you," I said. "But I learned how to win from watching what it did to Mom." At that, Lorraine whimpered. Not a sob, just a small broken sound that echoed louder than any scream. Venora pressed her hand to her mouth, her eyes wide. Then I reached into the folder again and slid one more document across the table. "This is a contract," I said. "A settlement. You sign it, and in exchange for my silence, for not pressing charges, you agree to vacate my house, Renounce all financial interest and stay out of my business and my life. You'd ruin your own father? He whispered, voice suddenly small. No, I replied. You ruined yourself. I'm just giving you the exit you don't deserve. The pen sat beside the paper like a quiet dare. He didn't move. Seconds passed, then a full minute, then Richard picked up the pen. He signed. The sound of his name being scratched onto paper was the sound of something ancient breaking. I gathered the documents, returned them to the folder, locked them into my briefcase. Venora left the room without a word. Lorraine didn't follow. She just sat there, looking not at me or him, but somewhere far away, like the last piece of her spirit had gone cold. Richard stayed seated, smaller now, diminished. His mouth was pressed in a tight line. He didn't speak. I stood by the doorway, turned once more. Merry Christmas, Dad. He didn't look at me. I opened the front door. The wind was colder than I expected, but I didn't flinch. Inside, I heard the faint chime of the wind bells Lorraine had hung last year. The same ones that had danced on Christmas Eve, back when we still believed this family meant something. I stepped outside. He wanted control. I wanted peace. Only one of us understood what that cost. He wanted silence. I gave him sunlight. By the time I pulled into the underground garage beneath my office building, the city had grown still again. The buzz of Christmas morning had faded into a soft hush. Empty streets, blinking stoplights, and store windows reflecting more memories than customers. It was 8:03 p.m. I hadn't eaten since morning, but I wasn't hungry. The ache in my chest had nothing to do with food. My phone lit up just as I was locking the car. Unknown number. I answered anyway. Ms. Dane? A calm male voice. Detective Harlan, Financial Crimes Division. We spoke last week briefly? Yes, I said, already climbing the steps 2 at a time. I think you'll want to come down to the precinct. 10 minutes later, I was in a gray conference room with flickering lights and a vent that whined slightly above us. Detective Harlan looked like someone who had seen too many families burn over numbers. He slid a manila folder toward me. We pulled your father's financial history going back 6 years. The property forgery was just the beginning. I opened the folder. Inside were printed statements. My name at the top. Not his, mine. But the transactions? Hundreds of them. Quiet deposits and withdrawals, like whispers on paper. The first one dated 5 years ago, the same month my design firm cleared its first big contract. I remember that month. I had champagne in one hand and my father's hand on my shoulder. You'll never have to worry about money again, he'd said, smiling. Not while I'm around. At the time, I'd believed that meant protection. Now it read like a threat. Harlan kept talking. He opened a separate account in your name. We confirmed it was unauthorized. Every dollar he skimmed from your company was routed through that account. You were the perfect shield. I ran my thumb along the edge of the folder. He's been stealing from me since before I even knew I was worth stealing from. Harlan gave a sympathetic nod. You can't access it yet, but you can freeze it. That'll trigger an alert on his end. It's your call. Freeze it, I said. My voice didn't shake. He clicked his pen, marked something on a document, then pulled out another sheet. There's something else. He pointed to a signature near the bottom of a transfer. The payer, Dane Family Holdings. The signatory, Venora Dane. I stared at it. My sister. Her name looked so innocent there. Just ink. But ink can cut. She was part of this? I asked, not blinking. Possibly unaware, he offered carefully. Or maybe just signing what she was told to. I looked away from the page, eyes focused on a crack in the wall. Or maybe she just didn't want to know. They called it family. I called it theft, wrapped in twinkle lights. You have grounds for a full case, Harlan said. forgery, fraud, identity misuse. But I was already reaching for my coat. "I'm not here for a court date," I said. "I'm here for closure." Back at my office, I turned on every light. I wanted no shadows. I wanted clarity. I powered up my laptop and pulled the frozen account files into a draft email. Addressed it to every one of my father's old business associates. Men he golfed with, men who owed him favors, men who looked away when the books didn't add up. I didn't write threats. I didn't need to. The facts were clear enough. I typed a single sentence. "Please see attached for your records. Let me know if you recognize any of these transactions." Then I scheduled it to send at midnight. After that, I called my attorney and read him the press release over the phone. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said, "It's strong. You sure you want this public?" "Yes," I said. "He wanted my silence. I'm giving him exposure." I closed my laptop and stood. On the corner of my desk sat the old photo, the four of us, in sweaters, holding cocoa, smiling like we hadn't already been lying to each other for years. I turned it face down. I used to think love meant forgiveness, that if you loved someone, you found a way to overlook the damage. But that was a child's version of love. Now I knew better. Love, real love, has boundaries. And family without truth is just a contract written in illusion. I shrugged into my coat and grabbed my bag. I didn't shut off the lights. I left them on, pouring across the desk, illuminating every corner. Let it all show. As I stepped outside into the December air, the church down the block began to chime. 12 slow, steady bells, each one echoing like the end of something that had gone on too long. The email had gone out at midnight. By the time I pulled off my boots and let my coat fall to the floor, I felt like I'd dropped a weight I'd been carrying for years. I thought that was the end. I really did, until my phone buzzed at 6:12 a.m. The name on the screen wasn't his. It was hers, Venora. I let it ring until the last vibration faded. Then it buzzed again. A text this time. "They took him in. Dad, he's not okay. Please." I stared at it. 5 words that felt like 1,000. I didn't respond right away. I walked to the kitchen, started the kettle, but my fingers trembled more than I wanted to admit. The moment had arrived, when consequence stopped being theoretical and landed with cuffs and fluorescent lights. A minute later, the phone rang again. I picked up. "Maris?" Her voice cracked. "Please don't hang up. They took Dad downtown. He looked old." I closed my eyes. "He is old, Venora. That's not new." A pause. Then her breath caught. "Please, don't let it end like this." I looked out the window. The world was still half asleep, dusted in snow and silence. "It already ended," I said quietly. "Last night." But I didn't hang up, because somewhere under the exhaustion and betrayal, I recognized that ache in her voice. I'd carried it myself. 2 hours later, I was pulling into the old driveway. The porch light still worked, flickering, but on. The rest of the house looked like it had exhaled its last breath weeks ago. Curtains half pulled, one shutter loose and tapping in the wind. Venora stood on the steps, wrapped in a heavy blanket, eyes red, hair tied back like when we were kids. "Mom's inside," she said. She hasn't said more than 3 words. I looked past her, the same house, but it felt like a replica, one made of memory and regret. "You once said we'd sleep on the porch if things ever got too heavy inside," Venora whispered. I looked at the wooden steps beneath her. "Then let's sit." We did, side by side. The cold wood creaked under our weight, just like it used to when we'd sneak out at night and whisper about college, boys, and a life far from here. "I thought he was doing it for us," Venora said after a while. I didn't ask questions because I didn't want answers. It was easier to believe he was trying to keep us safe. I didn't answer right away. The wind nudged the bare trees and carried with it the faint clink of wind chimes. "You saw what he was doing," I finally said. "You just didn't want to lose what came with it." She didn't argue. Her breath fogged in front of her, sharp and shaky. "You hate me," she said. "You should." I turned slightly to face her. "I don't, but I stopped needing you to understand me." She nodded, blinking hard. "I don't know who we are anymore." I shrugged. "Maybe that's the start of something honest." Behind us, the front door opened slowly. Lorraine stepped out, wrapped in an old shawl. She looked smaller than I remembered, eyes tired, shoulders curled in. "The house is gone," she murmured, voice barely above the wind. "And the family. It's gone too." I stood slowly. "No, Mom, it's not gone. It's just finally honest." She stepped forward, eyes glistening. "Can you ever forgive us?" I looked at her, at Venora, and then down at my hands, stronger than they'd ever been. "Forgiveness isn't something I give you," I said. "It's what I give myself, so I can stop being angry every time I breathe." Lorraine's lips trembled. She didn't cry, not really. But her eyes softened. She walked over and sat beside Venora. We sat like that for a few minutes, the three of us on the same porch, not saying much, just letting the cold sting our skin and remind us we were alive. Eventually, I stood. The sun was climbing now, turning the snow gold where it hit the rooftops. "You'll be okay," I told them as I turned toward my car. "Just don't sell what's left of your soul next time." Neither of them replied. They just watched me go. I opened the car door, slid behind the wheel, and let the engine purr beneath me. I didn't drive off right away. I looked back at the porch, our porch. The blanket Venora had wrapped around herself had slipped onto the wood. It fluttered slightly in the breeze, like it still had something left to say. They thought moving in with me meant owning my peace. They never realized peace was the one thing I'd never sell. I shifted into drive, easing onto the street. As I pulled away, the house shrank behind me. Still standing, still weathered, still full of ghosts.